On Friday, May 14th, there'll be thousands of dollars to be won. A lotto jackpot of $250,000. A new home, car, or that college education.
Lotto, you have to be in it to win it.
Next lotto jackpot, $250,000.
Coming up on the VC3 News Update, 4 new COVID-19 positive cases of evacuees in emergency shelters. The Royal St. Vincent and the Grenadines Police Force handed over 30 pairs of combat boots to acting commandant of the S.V.G Cadet Force. And the Royal St. Vincent and the Grenadines Police Force profoundly saddened by the passing of Mr. Jonathan Nichols, former Assistant Superintendent of Police. Join us at 7 p.m. for these stories and more on the VC3 News Update.
More jackpot money, more reasons to play this game. More money for way, Super 6 a bigger jackpot game.
The Super 6 jackpot for Friday, May 14th is $310,000. Super 6, more jackpot money.
More jackpot money, more reasons to play this game. More money for way, Super 6 a bigger jackpot game.
And welcome to this week's edition of Roundtable Talk. Of course, we are talking La Soufriere once again. We are talking the new alert system, which is orange. We have with us Permanent Secretary HUDSON NEDD, Director of N.E.M.O, Michelle Forbes. Of course, we have SYLVAN McIntyre from the Operational Support Team, CARICOM and CDEMA. And we have Dr. Thomas Christopher. Dr. Christopher, we want to start with you. What's happening at La Soufriere today?
Good evening. La Soufriere has been very quiet since the 22nd. It hasn't really given us much to speak about, which is definitely a good thing. So, you know, we've had like the odd sporadic earthquake. I think apart from that, the only highlight of what's been happening is the gas measurements, which have been going on and how we're interpreting them. But I think the good thing is that I think it's safe to say that the volcano is less dangerous now than it was in the middle of April. So I guess that is basically related to why the hazard level has been relaxed and dropped back down to orange, because it's not in a violent state at the moment. So people can get a bit closer to it now without their lives being in danger.
Okay, you're saying that it's less dangerous at the moment. Can you give us a guesstimate as to whether this will be the new norm?
Well, you know, I mean, volcanoes behave differently. The one in Montserrat has been nibbling at our feet for 25 years. I mean, every now and again it like hits us on the knee. I think your volcano is a bit different. This is more like a heavyweight boxer which comes at you really hard and beats you up really quickly and then goes away. So I kind of get the impression that when this eruption is over, La Soufriere will go back to sleep properly and not be really bothering people for a while. So I guess our main issue now is to try and figure out whether or not we think the danger has passed totally, because we know it's dropped off, but has it totally gone? That, I mean, that much we can't say yet, but it's definitely safer now than it was a month ago.
Okay, in terms of activities going forward, what is going to happen in terms of the work of the monitoring unit at Belmont?
Well, as most people would have known, that we had some instrumentation on the mountain, some really close to the dome, some on the crater rim. I mean, all of that has disappeared. So that needs to be put back in, and that would be a couple of seismometers, 2 cameras, the EDM network. There's also some instrumentation that never made it up onto the mountain, which we want to put in as well. Because one of the things that we have realized, or which is obvious to us, that before we were having these so-called dome emplacement events. This is before the earthquakes started happening in March. Now, those were only picked up on one instrument, which is the one on the crater rim. We don't have that instrument. So that is one of the reasons why we can't say with any certainty if there is a dome being in place, apart from the fact that we can't see inside of the crater. But if we had that instrument intact and it was showing us similar events, then we could probably say with a bit more confidence that we think that there's a dome being in place. But right now, we can't answer that question. We don't know if there's a dome or there's no dome. And if it's actually building a dome, it means that eruption is definitely not stopped. If it's not building a dome, then it's a totally different ballgame.
Okay, well, thank you for that update. We know that you're getting ready to leave us on Friday. We want to thank you for all the work that you have been doing for us here. And we look forward to seeing you on the ground again sometime soon. So all the best, and thank you again.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. TC. I like to call him Dr. TC. Michelle Forbes, we are now at a new, back to the original orange level. What exactly does that mean? What is the significance of that? And what are the next steps forward?
Okay, the orange alert level means that we can still have eruptions. Let's not think it is totally over. The orange alert means that you can go into explosive eruption at any time within a very short space of time. As we heard from Dr. Christopher, things are still very active. But because of the reduced activity since April the 22nd and the discussion with the scientists, we have agreed as a country to allow persons to go back to particular areas, communities as far as Mount Young on the windward side and as far as Petit Boudel on the leeward side. So we are confident that going back to these communities, even if there's an explosive eruption, they should be pretty safe within those areas. But we need to continue to monitor very closely and continue to listen to the information that we have about the volcano and really just be alert and be prepared at all times.
Let's talk about the different levels of alert, if you will, so that we can differentiate between all the various alerts. Okay,
the red alert means that an eruption is ongoing or imminent. The orange alert means that it's restless, it can go into eruption within a very short space of time. And the yellow alert means that things are getting a little bit busy, more activities than would have happened over the background level, if you want to say the background level. So if you notice, in December we went straight from background to the orange alert level, because what we were having was normal in November, early December, and then it just sped up because you already had an effusive eruption ongoing. So we jumped from the green basically straight to the orange in that case. But green is basically at the background level, maybe a few earthquakes every year, every 2 years. And yellow is when you start to get a few more signals, earthquakes, different things happening, and you say, well, okay, this is beyond what has happened in the last 2, 3, 4, 5 years, or even 10 years. And then, of course, the orange alert is when things start to pick up, and you know that there's a possibility that there may be an explosive eruption at some point. And then red, of course, is an eruption is imminent or eruption is ongoing.
That is the ultimate
yes.
level. You've said that there are certain areas in the orange zone that can now go back to their homes, clean up and so forth. While you have given abroad, do you have the specific communities?
We have the orange zone, so we have Petit Boudel, Trumaka, Rose Hall, Rose Bank. Those are in the orange generally. In the yellow, we have Spring Village, Gordon Yard, and those communities because people did evacuate from the yellow zone. And on the windward side, we have up to Chester Cottage, Byra, Goss. Those communities can actually return home. We had persons who actually evacuated also from Soufriere'S, Park Hill, and even some from Connery, and those are in the yellow zone. So those communities can return home.
Okay, now that alert level has actually been advised and is in effect, have you had people actually returning home yet?
Very few, very few. I wouldn't say maybe about 50, if so much, have returned home. I think some have become a bit comfortable in the shelters or their private homes where they are. Some are actually going back home and cleaning up. So they have indicated they are going back and forth cleaning up, and when they finish that, they want to return home by the weekend or next week thereabout. So it's ongoing. So there's a cleanup operations by families, cleanup operations by Bragsa, by the community also, because they're doing their own cleanup, and individuals, and then they want to prepare their homes so they can return back as soon as possible.
Will there be any mass return, so to speak? For instance, would buses take people in the same way that they were
Yes.
evacuated?
Yes, we have already started facilitating that. On Monday in particular, one shelter at Fair Hall would have indicated they had about 15, 17 persons for South Rivers, and indicated they were ready to go home. So we provided buses, we provide trucks for them to go back. We have some other communities now on the leeward side. Persons in the shelters on the leeward side have indicated they want to return on Monday and requesting that transport. So that those will be provided for those persons to return home.
Okay. Do you foresee any sort of challenges in terms of the actual return?
Some people actually said they don't want to return home, and that we see will be a challenge, especially if you're in the emergency shelters, the schools, and we know we're trying to get schools back up and running, so we can see some problems there if persons don't want to return home. Some are scared, some are traumatized, and so they don't want to return.
Okay. How many people are we accounting for at the moment in terms of who are either in private homes or in the public shelters?
In the emergency shelters, there are 4,430 persons, and that was up to on the 10th. We will get the new figures tonight. We had 4,430 persons in actually 84 shelters throughout Milan, St. Vincent mainly. We have persons who have also evacuated to Union Island. In Bequia, we will have almost 200 persons who would have evacuated to Union Island also. To Bequia, and in Union Island about 7 to 8 families. So we have persons scattered on 1 or 2 in Canawan. So, but in public shelters we have over 4,000 persons, and we have accounted for over 22,000 persons so far who have been displaced from the entire country in terms of the eruption.
Okay. Mr. McIntyre, you've been on the ground. You came before Soufriere'S as a consultant. And lo and behold, the big deed happened while you were here. How have things been going as far as you are concerned, as your role as part of the operational team for CARICOM CDEMA? How have things been going?
Thank you. I would want to first use the opportunity to congratulate Ms. Forbes and the system here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines for what I have seen, the collaboration efforts we are seeing. The response to a large extent has been coordinated well, despite some of the hiccups that one can expect in conditions like this. But I'm speaking not just for the CDEMA region, but I'm speaking also from comments from my international partners who've said they've not seen this level of collaboration coming together to mount a response. And that in itself is commendable. From my point of view, in terms of the technical contribution which I had to make, I did say before it was one of the other events that I had to sit and plan for. The level of complexities associated with an erupting volcano or a volcano who is likely to erupt is one that you cannot actually be that certain as you would have been able to prepare for hurricanes and other events. Yeah, given what it is, the instruments were in place for the the explosive eruption of the volcano, and once it happened, the system kicked in place, which was also tremendous. Everything did not go as the plans spoke, but that could be understood that the life of a plan is in its activation. And when it's activated, then you can see exactly where your weaknesses and your strengths are. So from the regional point of view, we were happy that CDEMA was able to give that added support to Ms. Forbes and her team and to the national entity, so that we could have ensured that the best of systems were in place. And the response and now moving into the rehabilitation recovery phases we are still continuing to give that support. It's a good show of regional collaboration. It's a good show of the regional response mechanism, and also it's a commendable show of international partners coming together. And one of the hallmark of our intervention here is the logistics hub that is very visible, very conspicuous at the old airport at Annesville.
And we'll talk some more about that effort when we come back after this
absolutely.
first break. Yeah.
So that's something to see.
Definitely. Okay. We'll be back in just...
On Friday, May 14th, there'll be thousands of dollars to be won. A lotto jackpot of $250,000. A new home, car, or that college education.
Lotto, you have to be in it to win it.
Next lotto jackpot, $250,000.
More jackpot money, more reasons to play this game. More money for way. Super 6 a bigger jackpot game.
The Super 6 jackpot for Friday, May 14th is $310,000. Super 6, more jackpot money.
More jackpot money, more reasons to play this game. More money for way. Super 6 a bigger jackpot game.
Coming up on the VC3 News Update, 4 new COVID-19 positive cases of evacuees in emergency shelters. The Royal St. Vincent and the Grenadines Police Force handed over 30 pairs of combat boots to acting commandant of the S.V.G Cadet Force. And the Royal St. Vincent and the Grenadines Police Force profoundly saddened by the passing of Mr. Jonathan Nichols, former Assistant Superintendent of Police. Join us at 7 p.m. for these stories and more on the VC3 News Update.
Before we took that first break, you were talking about the logistical component and what's happening now in terms of the response and so forth. Care to continue?
Yes. Let me put the logistics hub at Annesville into context, in that, following up on what Ms. Forbes has said, this emergency is far from over. The situation that you are experiencing here in St. Vincent and the Grenadines is very far from over. The mere fact that we do have some threats existing in the red zone and to an extent to the orange zones, people will not be going back anytime soon to occupy all of these zones. That's a given. And so understanding this, we recognize that there would be a need for ongoing support. And there would be need for transparency, accountability, and equity in the distribution of relief items. And so our partners came together to ensure that a system is established. And today we have seen some major tents, massive tents set up on the Annesville hub. And that tent is to ensure that items that come into the country, they are properly accounted for, they are sorted, stored in some instances, and distributed across country. It is both for the physical and the paperwork has to be undertaken. But interestingly, we've also were able to roll out an electronic system, the CDEMA logistics system, for the first time, rolling out in one of our countries. It's a pilot activity that we're seeing here. It has started sometime before it was initiated, but never took off. And so this is considered a pilot for St. Vincent and the Grenadines. We're hoping to see the success coming out of it. We are proud to have been associated with it. The support we're getting from civil servants, from volunteers, the cadet force, the police force, it is tremendous. And so once the system is up, it has been in the relief emergency phase. It is going to be going through the rehabilitation and definitely into the reconstruction phase, because we are expecting that more assistance would come. Despite an appeal for cash assistance, which is totally relevant, we believe that material, goods, and other types of food will be coming, and there will be need to be able to coordinate and distribute and account for. And this is one of the things that you would see happening there, because as I said before, we would be in this for a long time still.
Okay. PS, probably this is a good time to bring you in. Somebody's asking, what is government's plan for individuals who are afraid, traumatized, or have lost their homes and are unable to return home?
Well, the stage we're at now, we have not commenced an official discussion around what we're going to do next in terms of resettlements. But of course, many in different sectors have been thinking of and expressing some of the possible things that can be done. I'm quite sure that pretty soon those formal discussions will be on the way, because we are hearing from the psychologists many cases of persons who are unwilling to return to their former life, in the sense that they are traumatized by what they have seen, what they have experienced. And I'm not so sure that they are convinced that they will not go back. But for the moment, with all of the volatility and the situation being still fluid, you would get that kind of expression. But there are some cultural issues at stake for some people, and they may say that now, but they may change their minds. I think it is kind of premature to preempt them and to determine for them what is the best solution. Whatever we discuss as a government in terms of the government and the policy they will take, it would be informed by further research, further interactions with the persons, the advice of engineers, our seismologists, because the landscape has changed. I mean, from some of the images I've seen from getting the opportunity to go around the island some time ago to look at what the damage was like at the coast, especially, the riverbeds have definitely changed in elevation, and that has implications for the extent of lateral distribution of water and lahars and other debris, so that it really creates a fear factor, especially north of the Dry River and north of Richmond or Fitzhugh, for persons who either utilize those areas for farming and so on. So we definitely would be looking forward to that kind of planning. The Physical Planning Department, the Ministry of Housing, the National Emergency, the entire mechanism of the National Emergency Organization will definitely be brought to bear on these discussions, and the policymakers, I am quite sure very soon, as we contemplate the way forward.
Good. I know you're telling people to return home, but how practical is that right now in terms of places like Chateau and other areas where schools, and what is the situation with schools and health services, for instance?
The schools, the Ministry of Education actually have identified several buildings. I don't have them here with me. With the churches, they've actually negotiated with churches to use buildings for their grade 6 coming up. So they should be starting soon. So they're doing some cleaning up. There are several churches that will be used for those classes in the various communities. So that's ongoing. There are certain communities that definitely cannot return home now. Chatterville and Fitz use a tremendous amount of ash. The sheer amount of cleaning that will have to be done in those communities is enormous. Of course, over the Rabica River, as Pierre said, the landscape has changed. We are going to have flooding for some time. That has for some time in those communities, and where you would have had some rivers or when rainfall you have the usual flooding, it's wider. The spread is more lateral now. The rivers have filled up. It's different. So one of the things that we are working on with the Seismic Research Center is actually to do the digital mapping of the landscape to really inform planning, development planning going forward. And we have had some initial discussions with the United States Geological Survey in how we are going to go about that, because that has to guide our planning going forward. Where can we build or rebuild in the future? How has the landscape changed? How are the runoffs going to be? What type of flooding are we going to have? The flood maps will have to be done over a period of time, because we know the valleys some of the valleys have been filled up. So all of this is going to inform our planning going forward. So it's going to be some time before the communities, especially like Sandy Bay, return home, and if they do, has to be a lot of rehabilitation, if you want to put it that way. But some communities will take a little longer to get back.
Now you spoke about the fact that in terms of the maps and so on, would the zones would there be any consideration given also to changing the zones, the green, the red, and so on?
The boundaries?
The boundaries.
I think mainly the red. I think the other boundaries will pretty much remain the same, because we would have changed it in 2016 really to accommodate for the pyroclastic flows that after repeated studies we show that the pyroclastic studies have gone a bit further. Definitely we have had initial discussions of including Chateaubriand and Fitzhugh's definitely in the red zone, because we have seen evidence of the pyroclastic flows coming a little down towards Chateaubriand. So then once we have that kind of evidence, most likely we might have some changes as we go forward, but mainly for the red zone, maybe extended on the leeward side.
I want to look at operations, the daily operations of EUC and N.E.M.O. I know one of the things MCINTYRE noted was that ongoing support would require a system of accountability, transparency, equity in distribution, etc. How do you ensure that that is taking place now? Because I know you've had a lot of challenges, a lot of criticism where that is concerned. I think we can start that discussion. I was looking at the time, but I think we can start that discussion. What happens on a daily basis, on a regular day, on any given day?
On any given day, we have different operations happening. We can have up to 400 persons in the system on a daily basis. We have the National Emergency Operations Center, which is really the decision-making and the coordination component of the operations based within N.E.M.O headquarters. And that's where the agencies and the ministries come together to really plan anything that pops up, how we're going to deal with it. So we have the shelter management team from the Ministry of Education there. We have supplies from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, transport from Ministry of Transport and Works, Ministry of Tourism, Ministry of Health, and of course our regional international partners supporting the logistics system. So we're in there, things happen, we come up with, discuss what our solutions and how we're going to deal with that. Then we have the call center operations now, which is across the road. We have about 20 persons, 25 persons there on a daily basis, and they receive the calls that coming on a daily basis through our hotline numbers, people having queries, people still calling and register up to this point. There are people who still have not registered.
So people who left since...
People who left have still not registered. My family, I have family from Langley Park, they never registered, so some persons have never registered because they don't think they want to ask for the system for anything, put it that way. But I as I said to them, we need to know, have at least an idea of the number of persons who would have at least been displaced. So then we have the operations, and under the national system, under our structure, there are different agencies that are charged with different responsibilities. That's where you have to have some of the accountability coming. So we don't have to be looking over our shoulder. For example, the Ministry of Mobilization, we would have discussed this over the years, that once we have a major event, they would undertake the whole issue of distribution of food for families and persons not in the emergency shelters.
And we'll elaborate on that some more when we come back from this second break. Back in just a moment. Michelle Forbes, you're talking about the various agencies that perform various roles. Before you continue with that, somebody has a question. What about someone who's staying with relatives who registered and go to a shelter and are being told if they want meals, they have to come to the shelter for the 3 meals? Why not give people food to cook where they're staying? Is this happening?
The people who are still eating at emergency shelters, that's their choice. If they're not staying there, that's really your choice. But once you're in a private home and you register, you have your packages every couple of weeks. So I'm not sure. Maybe that's just
But because people probably still get the packages and still go to the
still
shelters.
to the shelters and eat also.
Okay.
So, yeah, so you can actually have your meals at the. If you're living nearby, in the system we have. Even though we have 4,430 persons in emergency shelters, we still have an additional 2,030 persons who go to the shelters every day for their meals.
Okay, and before we continue with...
I think sometimes you can't measure consumption of food in an exact way all the time. You know, so there might be instances where families would consume whatever came in a package, or there might be late registrations and they may not have been served as yet. And we try to introduce flexibility to some extent in the system. We wouldn't allow somebody in the community to be starved if they can come to a shelter and get food until the care packages get to them. Why not come and register at a shelter and get a meal? There's nothing really preventing you. We don't want anybody to go without a meal. So that is really what that is. And we keep appealing for some patience too, because whereas it might be inconvenient to leave a home in the community to come to a shelter, it's still better than going without a meal.
Okay.
So we will try as much as possible. Once the reports come to N.E.M.O, we'll try as much as possible to see how we can reach you. That's what we do.
Okay, Michelle, before I come back to you, a question for Dr. Christopher. Dr. Chris, somebody's asking, how do you know when the eruption is finished? It never really stopped since 1979. Burnt's land was at a level where it was not an indicative threat for 41 years.
Okay, yeah, let me say something now, which I said earlier, well, during the first month or so when I got here. There are a number of techniques that we're using now which did not exist in 1979. So the data set that we have does not go that far back. So we can't say, we can't say that it was doing anything between 1979 and now, because we just don't know. What we had here were seismometers, and this volcano, it seems to be seismically quiet when it's not trying to explode. So when it's not doing anything, or even if it's, well, people noticed that it more or less built a dome for a few months without really generating quite a bit of earthquakes. The earthquake started to happen in March, and that dome was being in place since December. So it's difficult for us to say what it was doing between 79 and now. So I don't think anyone can say it's been doing the same thing and it was less dangerous. It definitely was less dangerous because it was not going bang, and that is what is really important. So there might have been a loaded gun, but it wasn't going off, which is good. But in terms of the end of the eruption, what we would look for is more or less what we call flat lines in some of the relevant data sets. So, as I just mentioned, seismics may not be the best one to choose, because when it comes to earthquakes, this volcano is a bit sneaky. So it doesn't really generate a lot of earthquakes. And I think that is one of the reasons why this eruption started without us really realizing it was coming. When I said eruption, I meant the extrusion that started in December. It took some satellite imagery and some visual observations to confirm that there was actually a problem here. So I guess what we're looking for is the deformation, which is the swelling and the inflation and deflation of the island that should go flat. if you think your volcano is dead. What should also happen is your sulfur dioxide should fall away to more or less zero. When I came here in 2018, I tried to measure sulfur dioxide. No, sorry, not 2018, 2015. Or was it 2013? One of these days. 2013, yeah, it was 2013. The first time I came here, I tried to measure sulfur dioxide and there was none. And that was expected. So that is the kind of signals I would expect to see. Zero sulfur dioxide, a flat GPS. If it was a different kind of volcano, I would say definitely zero earthquakes. But you can have zero earthquakes when this volcano is doing something. So I don't think the absence of earthquakes means that it's not doing anything. It's just what it's trying to do at the time would determine whether or not it generates earthquakes or not. And it seems to only want to generate earthquakes when it's ready to explode. Well, as far as we saw for this eruption. So there are a number of things that we need to go back to zero. The gas is one of them, and the deformation signal is definitely the other one that we expect to just go flat and not do anything. So it's like if you're monitoring the heart rate of someone who's dying, you would expect that line to go flat. You know, there's no more beeps. So that is what we're looking for. No more beeps in the sulfur and no more beeps in the deformation.
Okay, thank you for that. Michelle, we're talking about the various agencies that are involved in the entire process, operations, supplies, distribution, and so on. You started to explain about the role of the national mobilization.
Mm-hmm. Mobilization has several roles. I think it's one of the busiest ministries now because they are now leading what we call the needs assessment for those persons who have been displaced. They've actually started a needs assessment interviewing the families that have been displaced, whether it's in the shelters or in the private homes. And they also undertake the role of distribution to families within the community. So they have that other role, and of course some psychosocial support. They still have to do some of the social aspect of it because you have different population who may not be displaced that they have to cater for, and also look at the overall welfare of the families that have been displaced. Some maybe on their radar already in terms of different social protection programs they have. So that's one of the busy ministries within this emergency. But what I must say, for this particular emergency, the entire civil service has supported this effort. And I really want to say thanks to the Chief Person Officer and the Cabinet Secretary. They have actually come. There are things that I could have just left with them to run. And that was so good because, for example, when we were setting up the call center, just made the contact with the CAPSEC, with the CPU, and it was done. It was staffed by civil servants, a few volunteers, and it's running smoothly. So there are things different agencies have really stepped up and taken up their role in this particular response and coordination. We have the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, who have really been pushed outside of their normal day-to-day activity in terms of looking at the supplies part of it. And we have different distribution points. We have the hub now that has been established at E.T. Joshua, the Commission Airport. We have that is going to be basically managed by our local senior civil servants, because as Sylvan said, we have the administration part of it, the accountability and the transparency part of it. So we have persons in accounts, persons who have that kind of accounting background, and at the SAS level, senior assistant secretary level, who will be undertaking those tasks. Then we have the hub at the distribution point at Camden Park, where they distribute to the emergency shelters mainly. So there are different things happening. We have had to create different storage. This is one of the things we actually partnered with the national properties in looking at storage, additional storage, even before the eruption, so that when the eruption, the explosive eruption took place, we were able to just activate certain buildings that were available, that we can have that extra storage. And then, of course, we have the local agencies, partners who have been partnering with us. We have the local Red Cross, who are doing their part in terms of feeding, doing food packages, water distribution, and we also, as we go into the cleanup phase now, we have asked them to help support the communities in giving cleanup kits. So they have started to distributing cleanup kits in the orange zone. So it may not be N.E.M.O, the Secretariat, maybe doing it, but it's all part of the national system. So if Red Cross give you a kit to clean, N.E.M.O is not going to come and give you another kit. because Red Cross will inform us that they have done that. So we have the different roles of the agency within the national system, and we lean on each other so we can say, okay, you can do this in this particular community. Another agency, we have the Rotaract Lions Club and other clubs, the social service clubs that have really stepped up and really play their part within the whole national mechanism in terms of coordinating the support to those who have been displaced.
BRAXA also holds a seat in that entire system. What do they do? What have they been doing? What are they doing now?
BRAXA, any maintenance at the emergency shelters is BRAXA. So we would have calls different times of the day, whether it's a plumbing issue, whether it's a electrical issue, and then of course they're also involved in the cleanup operations. They have been, we can reach I think up to Oya. The road is still a bit rough, but they have been clearing the roads. They have been in the communities clearing up the ash, mainly on the main roads, and they have actually started now the washing down and cleaning of the public buildings that need to be cleaned in some areas. So they have really been erecting the water tanks, ensuring that all of these things are in place. So they really have a big task within this whole response to the Soufriere'S volcano eruption.
And they're also busy right now in the cleanup of
the roads and so on. Yeah.
Before we go, somebody wants to know when we can go to Georgetown.
We don't know yet.
Okay, so
we don't know
Georgetown
when we give you the official. Still
very much.
People are going back and cleaning up and so on, but we haven't given the official word yet that you can actually occupy.
Okay, so it's not yet official that you can go to Georgetown. We'll come back in just a moment.
Go wrong.
Coming up on the VC3 News Update, 4 new COVID-19 positive cases of evacuees in emergency shelters. The Royal St. Vincent and the Grenadines Police Force handed over 30 pairs of combat boots to Acting Commandant of the S.V.G Cadet Force. And the Royal St. Vincent and the Grenadines Police Force profoundly saddened by the passing of Mr. Jonathan Nichols, former Assistant Superintendent of Police. Join us at 7 p.m. for these stories and more on the VC3 News Update.
Welcome back. This is our final segment. We are actually now in a different phase of this eruption. Things have quietened down somewhat, but the reality is that we are going to be in this for a very long time to come. It's not the end. Even though the volcano itself has gone quiet, life in general has not gone quiet. The way forward, Michelle Forbes, as you see it.
The way forward, we have to we need to actually now look at the whole recovery part of it, the recovery, how we're going to plan the recovery, and using the science as our background, the science of the volcano, and of course the science of our communities in terms of how they have been formed. Because if you look at a community like Sandy Bay, they have been impacted by various hazards over the years. That's why we have had the population shifting. We need to ensure too that look at the population that can actually return or not in the short, medium and long term. We have actually, Cabinet has actually set up an interministerial committee to look at recovery and rehabilitation of persons who have been displaced, and that is along with ministers and technical persons within the various ministries who will be looking at the different components of the whole recovery framework. we want to do a detailed, what we call a detailed assessment, a post-disaster needs assessment, and that will mainly be done when we can actually comfortably go safe into the red zone, because we have to count for every house that was damaged. Where's the family that was living in that house? So those assessments must be completed first to determine the needs of the persons as we go forward. And as I indicated, the Ministry of National Mobilization have started that assessment needs. Going forward, the hurricane season is 2 weeks away. We have over 4,000 persons in emergency shelters, and that means that our availability of space, if we are impacted by a cyclone, is reduced. So we have this whole multi-hazard, this complexity of hazards that we have to face, along with dealing with the population who have been displaced. So it's quite complex. So going forward, our really is to look at the persons who have been impacted, look at their psychosocial needs too.
Okay,
that is really important, that psychosocial support that is kicking in.
As a matter of fact, I have a question.
Yeah, the Ministry of Health, the Ministry of Mobilization, the Ministry of Education. What we are doing now, when I say we, I mean the national system, what we are doing now is one of the programs tailored at children in particular, called the Return to Happiness program. I think this week we would have rolled it out in over 70 emergency shelters to really take care of the children. How do they get back to some level of normalcy? And the resuming of the grade 6 in particular is one way of getting back to some level of normalcy, get the children a bit more occupied. Of course, we still have to find activity for the other children. So these are some of the ways that we have to think of our education. How is it going to continue? Our health system, the cleanup of operations, a big issue is going to be on the front burner right now, so that persons can try to resume as normal life as possible in those communities where you can return.
P.S., what are some of the challenges you foresee in this new phase?
Well, indecision could be a possibility, with persons being uncertain of what they want to do. So we are going to make decisions based on information, and we are working on behalf of the people, and so we would want to get to a point of fairly reasonable assurance of what people would want to do. There are different concepts, of course, in terms of returning people to normal lives and livelihoods. Many of the persons displaced are farmers, are involved in some kind of livelihood related to land, fishing or whatever. Some livelihoods would be hard to be replaced, so to speak. So some persons have to consider maybe retooling, maybe looking for other things to do, or maybe joining cooperatives where they could operate in the same area, but maybe in a different location. So we want to make sure that we address, as we say, the psychosocial issues, get persons to a comfortable place where they can actually make rational decisions and inform the process. We want also to continue to appeal for patience and for collaboration. We want also for persons who do not have to depend on the system, to allow those who are dependent to get the best out of the system. And there's a lot of discussion about the speculators and so on. I mean, we don't look for that, but we know that will happen in situations like this. But what we do appeal for is for the ones who has the greatest needs to be allowed to get to the table to get the support they need. But all in all, the collaboration going forward, there's a proverb that says the heights of great men are not achieved by sudden flights. This is not going to happen. A renewal of St. Vincent is not going to happen in an overnight manner. It's going to take time to rebuild. We're going to have to have new paradigms, new types of development. Even in housing, we have not been culturally used to multi-story housing, but we may have to consider that, put that on the table, get people adjusted to that lifestyle, you know. So there are different things that we're going to have to consider, and it's not going to happen overnight. It's going to need rational thinking, thought processes. This is not a partisan matter. I mean, we want everybody to be able to make a positive and a meaningful contribution to the process. And so it's going to take collaboration. We have to move forward in a spirit of unity in that regard. So that's where I want us to head.
Sylvan McIntyre, or you sit in a very special position. How do you see the continuing effort?
Going forward, I would like to encourage to build on what we have. There's a framework that is established. I would appeal for all to respect and cooperate with the system that is put in place. St. Vincent and the Grenadines has an opportunity to build on useful experience to be better at what we cannot prevent. One of the things that you have working for you is the regional response mechanism that is at your fingertips, I would say, to be called, and we've seen a show of that. I've been here before, during, and sometime after to ensure that the support system to the region is maintained. What you have here, I have seen leadership in a lot of spectrum. You have a prime minister who's been physically, personally involved in the process, giving guidance and support. You have disaster technocrats, you have public servants, permanent secretaries who sat at the Emergency Operating Center, and public servants who are giving human service, and volunteers. You see the system coming together. So I appeal on behalf of the PS's statement for collaboration and patience with the system and allow it to work. I have not seen a system that is perfect in my lifetime. I have had experience of Hurricane Ivan in 2004, and I've still had persons who say to me that they have not received anything. And these are some of the things that can happen after a crisis. And so the system is not geared to marginalize anyone, but the system is not perfect. And if people know of any way that they can help somebody else, they should step forward. Give support to what is in existence. It is set up for the benefit of all.
Okay, I know you want to say something to TC again, but I have a question that TC we need to answer. Is anything in place to monitor air quality? At what parts per million does sulfur dioxide in the atmosphere become poisonous? Dr. Chris?
Yeah, let me respond to the first part. There is a plan to put some dust tracks, which are instruments which monitor air quality, and when I say air quality, I mean the ash content of the air, the particle content of the air, not so much the chemistry of it. That has not been put in place yet. There's also a plan to put some sulfur dioxide tubes, which will monitor the chemistry of the air. And I guess these two sets of monitoring techniques would make sense more in the orange zone and the yellow zone. And then you might have a control somewhere in the green zone to see what the ambient values are like, well away from the volcano and well away from areas ash would have fallen. I mean, to be fair, this should have been done before the explosion started. But you know, SRC is a small unit, you know, and you know, we're more or less one layer thin in terms of what we do, and we were stretched, so to speak. And you know, when the explosion started, it was just three of us here, you know, and that was not easy for the three of us to be trying to hold down what was going on and trying to figure it out as well. So, you know, I should apologize for the absence of that, but it should have been done, and hopefully it gets done soon, especially due to the fact that people are moving back into the orange zones. I mean, it would be good to have an idea of what they're breathing in, both the chemistry and the dust content, the particle content. I can't remember what the second part of the question was.
At what point, what parts per million does sulfur dioxide in the atmosphere become poisonous?
Okay, I don't know the exact answer to that. That would be something a health expert would know. When I measure sulfur, I don't measure it in parts per million. I measure it in tons per day, the sulfur dioxide flux. And the concentrations that I'm getting with the multigas, which I think is closer to what the individual would be interested in, it would be like 1 or 2 ppm. But when we're up there and I'm in that gas plume, sulfur dioxide is not what's bothering me. It's the hydrogen chloride that's really damaging me. So I'm guessing the few ppm that we breathed in on the crater rim is not enough to kill anyone. And I've ingested or inhaled quite a bit of sulfur in my existence, and it hasn't killed me yet. So I'm guessing it's fairly high, but I don't know the exact number. But I think it would be a significant amount of it. I think the beauty about sulfur dioxide and hydrogen sulfide is that they smell. And what your body does is it's not going to stay in a situation where you are uncomfortable. So when you start to smell the sulfur, it will bother you and you will leave the area. So you have to intentionally hang around to get lethally dosed by sulfur, in my opinion, because you would have gone through quite a bit before you get to that stage, because you will be quite uncomfortable with the smell of it, and then it starts combining with your saliva, which is something I've experienced before. You start tasting it in your spit if you're in it long enough, and even that didn't kill me. So I think it's a lot.
Okay, thank you for that. Michelle Forbes.
Dr. Christopher TC, I know you leave us on Friday, and I really want to thank you for your work over the last few months. I think you have been with us the longest so far, and not just your work, you have been able to impart some of your knowledge on some of our volunteers and the seismic staff. And I want to wish you all the best, and we hope that we will see you again soon.
Yeah, let me say it was a pleasure. It's unfortunate what happened, but I'm glad I was able to contribute to the effort, because sorry, I'm tearing up a bit. But as I said, it was a proper team effort, and it was not just the officials or the scientists. It was population. Yeah.
Thank
Sorry.
you, TC. We appreciate you very much, and we consider you a Vincentian. Thank you. You have your honorary citizenship. Okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I couldn't
That's
hold it
fine.
together, but yeah, I'm really happy I was treated here. People are quite nice, lovely country, lovely population, and I was just glad I could help.
Thank you. We can't thank you enough. We really do appreciate you, and we look forward to having you back with us sometime soon. Okay? Well, that's our program for today. Thank you very much again, Dr. Thomas Christopher. Also, we want to say thank you to SYLVAN as well. You have also done quite a bit. You're Vince yourself already. Thank you so much for your contribution. You also leave shortly, I understand. We are very grateful and appreciate all your work and all your efforts. Thank you, PS, for joining the program. Thank you, Michelle Forbes. I know you have a mammoth task ahead of it, but I know you are well geared for the task ahead of you. Yeah?
Sure.
See you next week, Wednesday, for another edition of Round Table Talk. See you soon. Bye-bye.